This is New Day Northwest. Now, here's Margaret Larson.
Good morning, everybody. If you have ever gone out to a nice dinner and been intimidated by the wine ordering process, you're not alone. That's why we've asked sommelier David LeClaire from Seattle Uncorked to talk us through it all, because people are going to be going out for nice dinners during the holidays.
A lot of
right?
dining during the holidays.
And so we welcome you. So let's start out with just choosing a wine. You come in, there's an enormous wine list, and you don't know what they are.
Right. And I think the one thing that people are afraid to do is they're afraid to ask for help because they're afraid they're going to get steered to something that's really expensive. So if they say what's really good, then there's somebody's going to say this is a $100 bottle over here is really good, and if you don't order it, you feel cheap.
Right.
So really what you want to do is first of all ask like who here on your staff knows the most about wine and is really into wine, because not all servers are really into wine. A lot of them don't drink at all, or they drink beer. So get to the person who can give you some help if they don't have a sommelier. And then the next thing is then not be afraid to ask for some help, but you kind of have to give them parameters, and that's the easiest place to start. And that usually is a financial parameter to begin with. So I'm looking for something that's between $30 and $50.
And that's cool. Nobody's going to look askance at that if you say so.
Especially if you start with that, then they kind of know what category you're in.
And then they'll be able to give you some help.
Right.
So once you've ordered the wine and it comes to the table, there's this whole process, and I know that lots of us feel like, oh my gosh, we'd rather just skip this because we don't know what to do. Right. So let's reenact the wine coming to the table and tell me what we're supposed to do.
Well, the first thing that they're supposed to do when they come to the table is to show you the bottle that you've ordered and make sure it's the vintage that you wanted and the right winery and everything, and you approve it.
Yes.
And then once you've approved it, they're going to open it for you. Would you like me to open it for you?
I would.
Is it too early for you to have a glass of wine? Okay.
We'll just have a sip.
This is a beautiful bottle called Damsel Cellars, which is a young lady who's making wine over in Woodinville. This is only her second vintage.
I couldn't read that, Damsel, so that's great. Oh, good. We'll support her.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing an event of all women winemakers and women chefs coming up called...
Fantastic.
Basically what I do is produce wine events now, and this is called the Northwest Women Stars of Food and Wine. And
when does this happen?
That'll be in February.
Okay.
The Sunday after the Super Bowl. So yeah, we'll talk about that.
Come back and talk to us about that, because we definitely want to be supportive.
So first thing they're going to do is they're going to pull the cork out for you.
Okay.
And most people don't even know what they're looking for. So they hand you the cork, and what am I supposed to do with this cork?
Put it in my pocket? I don't know.
So you smell it, right?
Okay.
But what you're really supposed to be smelling is that it smells like wine, not like mold. So corks are spongy, and they can have a little bacteria can get trapped in there. So if a little bacteria is in that cork, it'll make the wine smell like musty, moldy, old towel, kind of wet cardboard. And if it is, then you just send the bottle back and ask for another one. Doesn't mean the whole batch is bad, just means that one cork was bad.
Okay, this definitely smells like wine.
That's all you're doing is you're trying to smell it to make sure it doesn't smell like mold.
Very good.
That's all you're doing.
So that's simple.
Right. Then when they pour you a little taste, your goal is to smell it again and make sure, again, it doesn't smell kind of moldy or musty.
You show us.
Oh, okay.
Let's see you do it.
All right.
Nose in there, spin it around.
And all you're trying to do is get a little oxygen in there and kind of let the wine kind of open up. So the easiest way is do it on the table. If you're really good, you can kind of do it like that eventually.
So on the table is easier if you don't want to, you want to make sure you're not going to slosh.
Right.
There's a good tip.
Then the next thing is that most people, when they taste the wine, they don't know what they're tasting for other than, do I like it? So again, your tasting isn't moldy or musty. That's the only thing you're really supposed to be doing. Because at that point, you've committed. You've already ordered this. You can't say, I'm just ordering it, and if I like it...
Take it back.
Yeah, especially if it's expensive.
Okay.
If it's inexpensive, sometimes you can say, I didn't really love that too much. But the one thing that people do all the time is they judge on a really minor sip, like a little teeny sip. And what they just did is brush their teeth, or they just had gum. Anything that is going to change your palate is going to make that first sip taste horrible. So that first sip is a sacrifice sip anyway. Just get your mouth used to it.
Oh, you did a
Get
little
that in your mouth.
swishing.
That's the aquarium sound.
Yeah.
So you do that. What you're doing when this is bringing oxygen into the wine. When you're doing that in your mouth, you're doing the same thing.
And that gives you a better
What that does is brings the flavor out.
Okay.
And what happens is people usually just drink like milk or Pepsi or anything just straight over your tongue and down the gullet. But if you keep it in your mouth a little bit and you do a little of this kind of aeration, it brings all the flavors out, and you get 10 times more flavor than if it just goes straight down the tongue.
I can't wait to go to the next restaurant and just gargle some wine for a while. I'm just oxygenating it. What's the problem
and
here?
How it works is if you keep it towards your lips, so it doesn't fall out.
I don't think he really has to do this 3 times. I think he just likes this wine.
That's pretty good.
Got you. Now, is there anything we're looking for in terms of the legginess or the way this goes down the glass? Is that all silliness?
The teardrops coming down are called legs, but it really doesn't have anything to do with quality. It just has to do with viscosity of the wine. So the higher the alcohol, the faster that those teardrops are going to fall. But it doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's a nice term called legs, so people often pay attention to it, but it really doesn't mean much. So the only thing that would really matter is if you were doing a blind tasting and you were trying to guess what this wine is, and you have all the information to go on but no name, you'd be looking at viscosity and saying, where's this wine possibly from? And
Okay,
that's about
so
it.
we don't need to worry about that.
That's
so
correct.
this is relatively simple. We say yes to the label. We smell the cork. We're just seeing if it smells like wine.
Right.
If yes, go forward. Do a little spin on the table. Take a decent sip. Just a little, you know, do what you want there. Whistle it around in your mouth. And if it's good, you say yes, and that's that.
And that's it. And
Simple.
your job is to keep the wine unless you really can't stand the wine. If you really don't like the wine, give it a few sips because you might take time to get that toothpaste or something out of your mouth, and then maybe a little bread. And if you still don't love it and you're really sweet, sometimes they'll take it back and give you something else.
But that's frowned
but that's
upon,
not
right?
really what you're supposed to be doing.
All right, so in this case, we have a screw top, not a cork. So
you
what's
you don't want to smell the screw top because there's nothing really to
won't
smell.
ask to do that.
But it's actually been rebranded, so it's no longer called the screw top. It's really called the Stelvin closure.
Really?
And so the waiter would come up and show you the Stelvin closure.
Yes.
And then what they do is they would crack it open for you, and then you just pour you the taste. But the fancy way to do that, if you're at home, is you crack it so it's loosey-goosey like that. And you start it right here, and you kind of run it down your arm.
Oh my gosh.
And woo, now
Let's
it doesn't
practice
seem
that at
so
home.
inexpensive
That
anymore,
seems
right?
really, and the rest of it's all the same, right?
Exactly the same. And
Okay.
then go see your swirl.
Now, if you, okay, here's my swirl.
There you go.
How am I doing?
All right.
Shall I try the gargle?
Yes.
Lord, I'm probably going to spit this out. You might want to step back. That was more of a swish, but
Hey, swishes work.
it tastes delicious, whatever this
And
is.
that's called Rocky Pine. That's from Chelan.
Ooh, that's yummy. So let's talk about you bringing your own bottle of wine to a dinner. Say it's an anniversary or whatever. You have a special bottle that means something to you as a couple. What's the process?
So in Washington State, it is legal, and it's usually legal in states that produce wine because it's part of the culture of the wine industry to bring in your own wine.
So it doesn't matter if I bring a Washington wine or something else.
It is not, but it's more of like states that don't produce wine typically don't even know about this policy, but it's legal in this state, so that's called a corkage policy. So normally what you would do is you would call ahead of time and you would say, do you have a corkage policy? And if so, what is it? And if the person answering the phone doesn't know what that means, it just could be a 16-year-old hostess that doesn't even know, so you ask for the manager. If the manager doesn't know what corkage policy is, then you're probably not going to embrace you bringing in your own wine. But then essentially what you're trying to do is bring in something they don't already have. So let's say they already had the Rocky Pond, but they didn't have this particular wine or this vintage, then it's okay to bring it in. Otherwise, if you're bringing in what they already have, that's kind of not cool.
That's not cool.
Right.
That's not illegal, but it's not cool,
It's
and,
not cool.
and you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Okay, so now you've brought your own bottle. They've said okay. Is there a corkage fee? Do you have to pay something?
So usually is anywhere from $10 to $25 per bottle that you open, and sometimes they'll have a limit to one bottle or something like that. So then what normally they do is they bring it and they open it for you, and I always ask for an extra glass. So let's say it was just the two of us, I would ask for a third glass. They don't know what that third glass is for. And then once they've poured your wine and you approve it, then what I would do is I would pour, you know, about at least that much, and say, this is for you.
Oh my gosh.
And you give it to the server or the sommelier or the manager, whoever's opened it for you, as a thank you. And then they don't feel like you're cheap. So what happens is if you give them the end of the bottle, when you're done, it looks like you're not interested and you lost interest.
So
You
do it at the
sacrifice right from the beginning. It's like going golf and throwing a ball in the water. Just do it right away. Give up a glass. and
This
then
is
move on.
great. Thank you. I feel like, don't we feel like we learned something with this? And you were the nicest man, and I'll remember that tip
Absolutely.
as well.
You
Thank you
bet.
so much. Up next, what to expect as the Seattle Sounders head to Toronto to defend their MLS Cup title. We'll be back after this. Thank you.